Hey guys, welcome back to Magic TV. My name's Craig. It is 9 o'clock on a Saturday, which means it's time to talk magic. I have interviewed over 200 people on this channel, and it is fair to say I am most excited about the person that you're about to hear from right now. This person has literally done it all and then some in magic. Like he has done Escapology, illusions, stage shows, kid shows, close up. He's been a dealer. He's worked in entertainment his entire life. It's safe to say he is a living legend of the British magical community. Everybody knows him, everybody respects him, and he's continuing to do so much now. I cannot wait to hear from this person because honestly, if you look up overachieving in the dictionary, you see a picture of this man right here. I am, of course, talking about the one and only Michael Diamond. How you doing, mate? You okay?
Yeah, I'm good, Craig. It's good to see you so early this morning.
I know we're kind of doing this very. I dragged you out of bed, Michael. I'm really sorry about that.
Yeah,
Uh,
I'm a real creature of the night, so being up this early, it's unnatural for me.
well, I got to say, first of all, you kind of win the award for best backdrop. Most people do this with a ball behind them. You've got like a sarcophagus, swords, Dracula. Like that's just an incredible backdrop for an interview. So
Yeah, this is just a corner of my living room, actually. So the whole house is like this. Actually, it looks like the set of Saw. My house, actually.
that's awesome. And what I said in the intro, Michael, is so true. I've been trying to interview you for a long time. You're very, very busy. You literally do so much. You're all over the place. And one of the reasons I've wanted to interview you is because you've done it all and then some. You know, you've been in entertainment your entire life. You've achieved massive success at everything that you've done. And your story is so inspirational. And for anybody who's watching this that's maybe new into magic or wanting to become a pro, you know, I can't wait for them to hear what you've got to say because, like I say, you've been there, you've done that, you've bought the t-shirt, and there's not one single area of magic that you've not been involved in and excelled in as well. It's incredible. It really is.
Excelled in. Um, that might be a bit too strong a word, really. But I've tried most things. Yeah, I think I like variety in what I do. So I
Yeah.
like to try everything. I really believe that you look back at the old masters of magic like Thurston and Blackstone and people in history, and they did a bit of everything as well. And I wanted to have a grasp on all aspects of my profession. But equally, I think it's very important to reinvent yourself every so often as well, just to keep fresh in yourself, but also to keep working because we all need to pay the mortgage. We've all got families to feed. You know, we all want to go on holiday somewhere nice. So, you know, you need the money and you need to keep working.
I completely agree. Well, you know, for anybody who doesn't know who Michael Diamond is, maybe they're from a different country or whatever, I want to go through your whole career, but I want to start off at the very beginning.
Okay.
Everybody has their own origin story into magic. You've been involved in magic and entertainment what seems like your entire life. Could you tell me about your origin story? How did you kind of become a professional magician? Where did that all start? You know, what's your origin story?
Well, I think like most magicians, it started very young. I can remember being very young, like 3 or 4, when I used to watch, give me age away here, David Nixon on the TV. He was the TV magician in the UK at the time and was my absolute hero. I loved David Nixon. Plus, my dad, who was a professional artist, had a slight interest in magic. When he was in the RAF, he used to make vanishing cigarettes out of elastic and like pen tops, you know, like biro tops. So he used to do that sort of thing. So he had an interest. And I think when he saw I was interested in magic, it sparked his interest off again. So him being an artist, he used to make me tricks out of cardboard. So they were my first tricks, things that my dad made me. And plus, at the end of my road was a joke shop that sold magic. So you can add that into the mix. In Liverpool itself, we had the Wizard's Den, which is a very, very famous magic shop that goes back to Will Goldston was
Ooh,
one of the original owners of that, apparently. And then I used to go on holiday to Pontins every year, and they always had live variety acts on every night. So from a very early age, I was exposed to magic and variety entertainment. So it was very natural that I should go into that. And it was a common interest that me and my dad shared. So we could spend time together going to magic shows, going to conventions. We joined Mahatma Magic Circle in Liverpool together. We've both been president. My wife's even been president of Mahatma, so we keep it in the family.
Wow.
So yeah, it's so that's where it started really. And then when I had one of those weird birthdays. So I was 19th of September is my birthday. Don't forget the cards and presents. So I was one of the youngest ones in the year. So I did my A levels just to keep my mum and dad happy. Really, I had no intention of going to university. I wanted to work. So I left school at a really weird age. I left school at 17.
Mm.
So even though I'd finished my A levels, I wasn't, I'd left in the summer, but I wasn't 18 until the middle of September. So I had to work, and that led me into my first job.
And were you always involved in entertainment, or because obviously you're talking about you left school at 17. Did you do shows up until that point, or was it kind of more of a hobby that you shared with your dad? And when you left school, were you thinking, okay, I want to be in entertainment? I've been exposed to variety my whole life up until this point, or was it, no, I'm going to get a different job?
No, it was always going to be entertainment, magic, and I'd done shows from very young. I think I can remember doing my first ever show at Pontins on holiday in one of the talent competitions when I was about 6 or 7, it must have been. And my thing back then was impressions. I've always been a bit of a mimic. So I used to do impressions. That was my first act, really, impressions. And that led into impressions doing magic. So I would do like Margaret Thatcher doing the candle through arm, stuff like that. Prince Charles, doing those voices, but doing magic. And my dad used to write my scripts, which were pretty corny at the time, but suitable for my age.
Hmm.
And then basically the impressions and the mimicry faded away, and it just went into the magic. But I always liked comedy magic. I always liked, because David Nixon was my idol, and then Paul Daniels, of course. It was stand-up comedy magic that I really enjoyed. So that's what I went into. And then into kids entertainment. I did Punch and Judy, again from an early age. So I think I did my first paid show when I was about 11. And I think I got 15 quid for that. So that will have been in 81, 82. And I used to do kids' parties at weekends. I was a kid myself, really. That's why I enjoy watching Ryland so much, because he reminds me so much of myself. So I was always doing it. So by the time I'd got to 17 and decided that was going to be my career, I already had quite a lot of experience under my belt.
Mm.
I'd done quite a few different things. Well, when I say quite a few different things, at the time it was really a bit of close-up magic, my stand-up comedy magic, which was the burnt and restored £5 note, 6-card repeat, sucker silk, that sort of thing. I did my kids show and Punch and Judy. So I was ready to work, and I had some contacts in the business already as well.
Oh, wow. So at that point, then you were like, right, okay, I'm going to go into entertainment. And did you have a plan? Did you, because I know that you worked at Pontins early on in your career. Was that the plan, or were you carrying on doing shows? And then like, where was your first kind of break in leaving school?
So I knew that leaving school was approaching. As I say, I did my A levels to keep my mum and dad quiet, really. They wanted me. I think they wanted me to go to university, and I think my mum would have liked me to have an academic career, because my mum was a senior medical lecturer. My dad was an artist, so I think I took a little bit after my dad more. So my A levels I did was English literature and art. So I knew they were coming up, and I knew I wanted to do something. I loved Pontins. I loved everything about it. So I wanted to go and work for them to do the summer season. And a friend of mine in the business who had worked for Pontins for years as a kids entertainer, a cabaret, he'd been an entertainment manager. guy called Jeffrey, who went out as Dolphini the Clown. He said to me, okay, well, when you apply, don't apply to be a general entertainer, a blue coat. Apply to be the kids' entertainer. He said, you'll get less hours and you'll get triple the money. So I said, oh, well, that appeals. But I want to do some of the stuff that the blue coats do as well. I wanted to do some of that sort of stuff. He said, well, that's okay. You just put your blue coat jacket on when you do that, and you'll join in, and you'll still do everything. You'll be in the shows, you'll do the singing, you'll do the dance routines, you'll do all that, which is what I wanted to do. I said, okay, so that's what I'll do. He said, have you got an audition date yet? I said, yes, I have. I've got the audition date, which was, as I say, I knew it was coming up. So it was quite early. I was still at school. And Jeff said, well, I'll give you a letter to take, a reference. So I wrote in and they said, sorry, we can't take you on. You're only 17. I'm like, right. They said it's licensed premises. You've got to be 18. You're going to have to come back when you're 18. And of course, that was towards the end of the summer season. So that put that to bed, really. I should have actually done what everybody else seemed to do, which was lie about their age. When I started working Pontins, there's loads of people who were 16, 17 working in the Ents department. They just lied about their age. But I didn't, because I was, far too honest. So I was stuck. I was like, what am I going to do for the summer season? I finished my A-levels in June. What am I going to do? And at the time, I was a regular at a place in Blackpool called the House of Secrets, which was a very famous magic shop. When you call it a magic shop, it wasn't really a magic shop. It was more like a club. It was a closed door. You had to ring the bell, and somebody had come down and peer at you through the door. And if they knew you or thought you looked okay, they'd let you in. It was one of them. Mm-hmm. Run by a fantastic guy called Bill Thompson, who's just a legend, but sort of like almost an underground legend in magic. But he's influenced so many people, certainly, in the UK, Paul Zennon, Russ Stevens, Russ Brown, so many people.
It's the reason why Russ Brown named his venue the House of Secrets.
That's right.
For that reason, to pay homage to Bill Thompson.
That's right. And we all really became known as Bill's boys. And Juan Tirado says, he was our Fagin. And he was. So, and it was really nice, actually, when Russ was opening the House of Secrets, he called all the Bills boys and said, do you mind us calling it the House of Secrets? How do you feel about that? And we were all, yeah, absolutely. Fantastic. It's a great idea. We love it. So Bill had said to me, I told Bill my problem, and he said, I think I might be able to help you there. Blackpool Pleasure Beach are looking for somebody. And I'm like, oh, wow, Blackpool Pleasure Beach. He said, yeah, they're looking for somebody to do kids shows in the day and then do close-up magic at night. And I'm like, that's perfect. Ooh. He said, there's a guy called Peter Nightingale. He's got his own show there, which is a family show. Get in touch with Peter. So I did. And he took me on at Easter weekend as like a trial weekend. And I worked for him over that weekend. And then by the end of the weekend, he said, yeah, I'm really, really happy. I'm happy for you to come and do the summer season for me. So that's it. So my first summer season, which was a real baptism of fire, was Blackpool Pleasure Beach. But there was so much involved in it. It was, so Peter had a place called the Sheriff's Bar, which doesn't exist anymore. It's now the Passage del Terra, if you know Blackpool Pleasure Beach. Mm-hmm. That used to be called the Sheriff's Bar. And that's where Peter had his show, the Peter Nightingale Show. And it was a family magic show. It ran most of the day and then into the night. So there was actually non-stop entertainment in that bar from 11 in the morning till 11 at night. Wow. Of some sort. And the idea is we get you in, free show, and you spend your money on the bar, on the food. And Peter used to sell stuff as well, which is a whole other story. So when I started working for Peter, he said, okay, well, you'll do your daytime show, and then you'll have a break for your tea. come and do the evening show. And then after that, you go straight upstairs into a room called the Horseshoe Bar, and you do close-up magic before a show called Mystique, which in the UK, everybody knows Mystique. It was Russ Stevens'
Yes, it
show.
was. Yeah.
I mean, obviously Russ was a name on the magic scene anyway, but this is the thing that really made him explode onto the magic scene. And it was the second season of Mystique. It was the first time a show had ever been brought back for another summer season. So that's what I had to do. And it was 6 days a week doing that. So kids' magic shows in the day, kids' magic show at night, close-up magic in the evening. And then on the day off, Peter Nightingale would book me out to do other shows. So I'd be going to do kids' shows in the day and then some hotels around Blackpool at night. So I didn't get a day off. It was 7 days a week pretty much until Bonfire Night. So I started in July, finished on November the 5th.
Wow.
You learn your trade very, very quickly.
Yeah, talk about flight time. Wow.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I've always been about...
I don't know, but I bet you weren't on a great whack in terms of money.
No.
The reason I bring that up is because I see a lot of advice on Facebook groups these days, and it's like, oh, I want to turn full-time pro. How do I do it? Well, don't take less than 700 quid for my first gig. It's like, no, you gotta learn your trade. You gotta, I did, you did, and I think these days a lot of people are just assuming the second they go full-time pro, they can command a ridiculous fee when really I think it's the most important thing is flight time and experience, and that's something that's missing.
Totally. You can't go out at full whack professional rates when you haven't done your apprenticeship, you haven't done your time. Although I think with close-up, when you're doing close-up walk-around entertainment, it is a little bit easier.
Yeah.
You certainly couldn't do that with a stage show or a cabaret or something where you have to stand in front of an audience because you're not going to be ready.
No.
Not at all. Yeah, it is. And I built up so much material in that time as well. You just... And then you're adaptable. You can turn up at a venue and it's not what you thought it was going to be. Because let's face it, agents aren't going to tell you everything you need to know about a gig. They just want you to turn up and do it so they get the commission.
Yeah.
You turn up and it's not what you thought. You need to think on your feet and think, oh my God, what am I going to do? And you need to be adaptable and you need extra material and you need everything, all that experience to be able to cope with that. Because honestly, when I was at the Pleasure Beach, not so much Mystique. Mystique was great. I really enjoyed that. And Bradley Walsh was the resident comedian the year I did it. So,
wow,
which was great. So again, I was making loads of contacts in the business. But the daytimes in the Sheriff's Bar, it was a bear pit. It was something happened every day. Something funny happened every day. I could probably do a whole hour just on that first summer season.
Wow. That's incredible. I mean, talk about trial by fire. So you get to November. You've had probably more experience in that 6-month period than a lot of people have in years.
Mm.
Are you then kind of thinking, right, okay, I've got all this experience. I still want to do Pontins?
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
So the contact I had, Peter Nightingale, who was a great guy. He's still with us. He's in a home. He's got problems, but he's still with us. He was great. So I finished the summer season and I had a flat in Blackpool. So again, 17. And I turned 18 in that September. But, I had my own car. I had a flat in Blackpool. Yeah, let's not go into that. So I got home in the November back to Liverpool. And Peter Nightingale, because he was only from Burnley anyway, he would give me the kids' parties. So weekends, he'd be sending me out to do kids' parties. And that Christmas, he'd be sending me out to do all the company parties, social clubs, that sort of thing. So he took a very small commission, but he kept me going all over the winter as well. So come January, I reapplied for Pontins. Because I was 18, they accepted and they said, okay, you can actually go through with your audition now. So it was January at Pontins Southport. And I have to say to the people in the UK, this is when Pontins was good.
Yeah.
Back in the day, it was owned by, I think it was owned by Bass at the time, Bass Breweries, or it could have been Scottish and Newcastle, I can't remember. But it was good. I mean, we'll go into that in a minute. So January comes, and I've got the audition, and I've got my audition because I was going for kids entertainer. My audition was with the guy who was the head booker for Pontins, a guy called Bob Summers. Now, it came under the umbrella, the very famous Jimmy Kennedy, Jim Kennedy Enterprises. They booked all the entertainment for Pontins, but Bob Summers ran the in-house entertainment. So my audition was with him. And I still had this letter from Dolphini the Clown, from Jeff Ree, to give to him. So I turned up, and the first thing I had to do was I had to do my audition. And because I was going for kids entertainment, I had to do a kids show. So I got all the other people who were auditioning for Pontins to be Bluecoats sat on the floor in front of me. And I just did I did 15 minutes of my kids show for them. And I just said to them at the start, pretend you're 6 years old. And they did. Finished that, which went okay. I sat down with Bob. And before he'd even started the interview, I gave him this. I said, oh, by the way, this is from Jeff Ree. He said to give you this reference. So he opened it and he read it in front of me. I had no idea what it said. I hadn't opened it. And Bob said, how much do you want? Straight away. So that was, and I can't thank Jeff enough for that.
Wow.
So I got the audition, and the first thing you do when you work for Pontins, you go to a seminar with all the staff from all the parks. And back then, I think there must have been, I know at the height of Pontins' popularity, there was about 33 centres all over the UK. There was in Jersey, there was some in the Isle of Wight, there's one in Ireland. So there was hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people went to this seminar, learning stuff that I really didn't need to know as kids entertainer. They were teaching you how to do bingo and ballroom dancing and stuff, which I didn't need to know. But it was good, a good skill to have. And then a week after that, for Easter, this was Easter 1990, I was sent to Hemsby near Great Yarmouth for my first summer season with an ex-manager called Ian Johnson, who again I'm still in touch with today. And again, that was another thing, you're learning so much more there. Where you're at Pontins, you're learning so much about the technical side. I didn't know an XLR from a jack back then. Yeah. But you're learning that as well, and working with a team. So and again, it was 6 days a week. You had one day off, but you went in on your day off back then. You watched the cabarets, you got friendly with the cabarets. I still impress my son and daughter, who are massive Star Wars fans, as I know you are. That back then in 1990, I was working with Kenny Baker. I was working with Jack Purvis. And for those who don't know, Kenny Baker was R2-D2. Jack Purvis was many characters. They were both little people. And Jack Purvis was the Jawa who famously goes, OTD, and shoots R2-D2. Well, I was working with them every week. They signed my 1977 Star Wars annual.
Wow.
So it was just great. The holiday camps back then were brilliant. There was 2 massive rooms and like a piano bar. Each room had its own resident band, and each room had at least one cabaret a night. And then the piano bar had a resident piano player who did sing-along stuff, called, what was his name? Roy Powell, Uncle Fester, because he was bald. And then they had a late-night comic on in there, which was normally started about midnight. And you'd watch all these things, and you'd learn from the other acts, and you'd make the contacts. So it was great.
That's awesome. Did you ever did it cross your mind, you know what, I don't need Pontins, I could go back and do the Pleasure Beach again, I've had a great time, or was it kind of a case of, I've done that, I've got what I needed out of that, this is where I need to be now? Well,
I did 2 years resident children's entertainer at Pontins in Hemsby for Ian John. Excuse me. And the great thing about that, I gained so much material. So when I was at the Pleasure Beach in 1989, I was doing the same show twice a day. So my kids' show was really polished, but it was one show because it was different audiences all the time.
Yeah.
When I went up to Pontins, I had to do 6 different 1-hour shows a week. 6 different 1-hour shows a week.
Yes.
And I turned up with a 1-hour kids magic show. I had my Punch and Judy, which was about 25 minutes. and I had about a 45-minute like kids on stage game show, and that was all I had. But I had spare magic stuff and spare things that I brought. But so by the end of the season, I did have 6 different 1-hour shows plus spare stuff as well. So I did my 2 seasons, and then I did want to move on then. So I sent letters and videos. Remember when you had to do that?
Yeah.
Letters and videos you sent around to everybody. And one of the people I sent to was Blackpool Pleasure Beach. And the Ents director for Blackpool Pleasure Beach at the time was a guy called John Butcher. And John wrote back to me. I was still at Pontins at the time. And he said, yeah, we'd be interested in using you for next season. Come and see us. So at the end of the season, I did. I went to Stageworks office in Blackpool, spoke to John Butcher, and somebody else was there as well. I can't remember who it was. And they said, we'd like to offer you your own show next year at the Pleasure Beach. And I'm like, wow, really? Okay. And I was 20 at the time. So we negotiated it, and they gave me my own show there. It was in the Sheriff's Bar. It was the Michael Diamond show. I had an assistant. And I did that for another 2 years.
Wow.
So in 92 and 93. And then I was ready to move on again at the time.
Yeah. But I mean, wow. I mean, how much I didn't know any of this about you. I mean, you literally, from the age of what, 17, you're literally working every single day, doing multiple shows a day, doing close-up, doing cabaret, doing illusion shows, doing kid shows, doing absolutely everything. I mean,
yeah, everything.
That's
and
amazing.
loved it and I didn't have a holiday. I think I took my first holiday on my own as an adult in 1996. No, it wasn't. It was later than that. 98 maybe. Because I loved it. I just wanted to work all the time. And when I wasn't working, I was thinking about working and practicing and applying for stuff and thinking up routines.
And again, you know what's really interesting, Michael? These days, a lot of magicians kind of almost like put themselves into one area. So you see close-up magicians going, "Oh no, I wouldn't do a kid show. I wouldn't lower myself to doing a kid show."
Oh yeah.
Or you see stage magicians going, "No, I won't do close-up." Or they're kind of, people just stick to their one thing and almost look down at everything else. You're there doing everything. You've got such an eclectic range of skills. And I've always said on this channel, I think it's important to do that, because a close-up magician is going to be a better close-up magician if they know how to work a stage. A stage magician is going to be a better performer if they know how to interact with children, and they can do a kids show and they can bring kids up on stage. I think that having those skills is so important.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, you know what it's like. You turn up to a close-up gig, and again, it's not what the agent told you. It's one big table of 20 people. And it's like, how am I going to work this? And I've always worked it like I was doing a stand-up show, really. You stand at the end of the table and you entertain everybody in one go. And, thank God for balloon modeling in that sort of situation, because that's killed loads of time for me when I've been there for, a certain amount of time. And again, equally, if you haven't got that grasp of entertaining kids, you turn up to a wedding and you know what it's like. You're being followed around by kids. You have to know how to deal with them and how to work for them, as well as work for the adults and work for big groups, and, know how to approach the bride and groom and the top table. And that just comes from doing, as you say, everything that you can do. But I had such a voracious thirst to work and learn back then. I'd say yes to anything. I would never turn down a show. Somebody said to me, "Oh, always say yes and then worry about what you've got to do." And I did.
Well, when you were doing the Michael Diamond show, you said you had an assistant. Is that when you started doing the illusions in your show as well? Is that when you started bringing in illusions?
No, well, that was when I was at Pontins.
Oh, okay. You started doing that at Pontins as well. Okay.
When I did my first season at Pontins, I had 2 illusions. I had a 3-sword suspension, which is an absolute bitch to work. It's one of the hardest illusion I've ever worked. And I had a zigzag. But I had to do like a 15, 20-minute spot in the Sunday night variety show. So I met a dancer there called Kirsty, and we put this 20-minute spot together with the three-sword suspension, the zigzag, and there was some other small bits in there to fill it out. So that was my first illusion show, really. But certainly when I was at the Pleasure Beach, I think one of the things that John Butcher liked was that my show that I was doing, although it was a kids' family show, it did have a couple of illusions in it as well. And I was doing UV puppets back then as well, which is something I'd learned from Peter Nightingale back in 1989. He was the first person who really showed me how a UV show works.
So here's the question: you finished at the Winter Gardens. I kind of think of you. I mean, I know you do everything, but a lot of the things that I think of when I think of you is a lot of the horror stuff and a lot of the macabre stuff, and also you as a lecturer and a dealer. You haven't even mentioned anything like this yet. So how did we get to that? So you finished the Winter Gardens. You kind of gone 2 years is enough of this. What was the plan then? Where did you go then, and how did we get to being more involved in escapology and kind of the bizarre type of magic that you're really well known for in the UK?
I think that had always been there. I'd always been a fan of certainly horror and the occult and the supernatural since I was very young. You know, I had two unmarried aunties who used to look after me when my mum and dad were at work, and they were both weird. Auntie Lil, who was Elizabeth Doyle, my Irish auntie, who used to live with us, used to read me Dracula when I was like a toddler. And my other auntie, Auntie Pearl, she used to, she used to read a book to me called The Vampire Lover's Bedside Companion. And she used to take me to Highgate Cemetery and the Tower of London and the London Dungeon when I was a kid. So I always had that interest there. And I think it just took me a few years. And similarly with the interest in escapology and Houdini. And I'd known Murray, the famous Australian escapologist, before I became one of Bill's boys and discovered the House of Secrets in Blackpool. I'd discovered Murray's Magic Mart, which was in Blackpool, it looked like Steptoe's Yard in there. It was a dark, dingy place full of crap, but it also had Murray. Murray was there. And if anybody doesn't know Murray, the Australian escapologist, he was a contemporary of Houdini. He was touring at the time. They were competing against each other. He was an escapologist, did a full evening illusion show. And I used to go into his shop and talk to him about, again, that's a whole other hour's show talking about Murray. So I had the interest in escapology, I had the interest in horror. In the 80s, I was buying stuff from the Supreme Magic Company that was like the Charles Cameron, Tony Shields, Bizarre Magic books. So I always had that there. It was almost like, well, how do I get that into a commercial act? So, and Sideshow is another thing that I was always into, but I didn't know how to get it into a commercial act. So all I would do is I would put little bits in. So in my cabaret show, I would have like a head zopper routine, but I'd put like a Frankenstein wig on and the bloody coat. And so, I would ease that in. When I did my illusion show, there was fire eating in there. There was an escape in there. So that was always there, but it was very, very small part. And then I think it was really when I'd stopped doing summer seasons, I'd stopped doing residency in the early 2000s. And I was getting asked more for specialist shows, really. That's certainly when I put the Escapology show together, when somebody said, oh, can you do an escape show? Can you do an outdoor show? Can you do an arena show? And that's, I put those together. But certainly the Bizarre Magic, I was performing that in the mid-90s, sort of like separate to the stuff I was doing. And again, nobody was really doing it then. It was very difficult to get a paid gig doing Bizarre Magic because nobody knew what it was. So my entry into that really was doing some of the early Bizarre Magic conventions and putting together routines and performing in their shows. And then from there, I realized that, oh, well, actually, yes, you can do this for a paying audience. But what you have to do is you have to sort of like find your venue. You have to find your audience and almost put it on yourself, really.
Mm. I mean, talking about Escapology, I remember the first time I saw you perform live. I saw you do your straight jacket escape, and still to this day, I've seen a lot of people do the straight jacket escape. Michael, genuinely, I think you've got the best, most entertaining straight jacket escape I've ever seen. I think it's brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
Oh, thanks, thank you.
I mean,
Yeah, the first time I bought, there used to be a place in Blackpool. This was in '89 when I was doing the summer season. There used to be a place in Blackpool called and it was on Coronation Street, which is at the side of the Winter Gardens. So I was at the Pleasure Beach, but this place at the side, it was run by a guy called Cyril Critchlow. And this venue, the Coronation Street Theatre, it had everything. It had a theatre, it had a cafe, it had a magic shop, and then in the basement, it had a magic and entertainment museum.
wow.
It was an amazing place. And I went into his shop one day, and he had an old Davenport straitjacket for sale, which I think was about 30 quid. And I bought it, and I used to practice it in the car park of the Pleasure Beach. So, between shows, I used to get Peter Nightingale and another guy who sadly passed, who used to work with me, a guy called Alan Phoenix. And so that's where I learned it. So I'd spent all those years developing it, really. And there's some standard lines in there, as there is with most things. But it was the straitjacket I use is a genuine straitjacket. It can be examined. It's the one I use now is a real straitjacket. But yeah, I think the straitjacket, I do two different types of straitjacket. So I either do it as a comedy routine, but a real escape in my cabaret shows and that sort of thing, or I do it hung upside down from a crane, and that's a completely different thing.
Like that's scary. I mean, did you ever think, hang on a minute, I'm hanging upside down from a crane here. Something could seriously go wrong. I could be doing card tricks instead. What am I doing? Like, is it is it the thrill? Is it like, why do you get into escapology? What's the...
Oh, that's a very good question. I think it was knowing Murray and again, reading books on Houdini when I was a kid, seeing the Houdini movie, Tony Curtis. So I always liked that. Do you know what it was? I always liked things that looked real or were real, which is another reason why I got into the sideshow side, because most of the stuff, they're not tricks. The other thing I find today is, magic secrets. People, it's like, the thing that nobody hates Star Wars more than a Star Wars fan. The thing with magicians is they're the worst people for keeping secrets. They really are. I mean, look at the whole Murray debacle at the moment. Whereas Sideshow and Escapology, it's more difficult to learn. The secrets aren't out there as readily as magic. And I like that. I like that people perceive it as real, which most of it is. And it's a real skill that you have to do it. It's not just practicing in front of a mirror in your room. You have to actually get out there and do it. It's certainly not the thrill, because I'm afraid of heights. I'm not a big fan of heights at all. But when you're upside down, it's different. It's almost like you don't gauge the height you're at when you're dangling upside down, and you just want to get out of the bloody jacket and get back down. But one of the other things I did was I worked in Finland for Father Christmas for a while for a company called Canterbury Travel. So I was going out there and doing kid shows, and then I got to know the owner of the company pretty well, and we put together illusions. So when the people are out there, they'll see elves and Santa appear and disappear. They'll see elves float in midair. They'll see a sleigh fly through the air, things like that. And we put those illusions together. And one of the things I knew from some of the illusions that we made is that a tiny little piece of metal cord like that thick will pick up a car. And I knew that. So when the rigging that I had to hang upside down for the straitjacket, I knew that I could pick a car up with that. So I wasn't afraid that it was gonna snap or I was gonna fall or anything like that. So
I just find it amazing that you know, you're talking about, oh yeah, I was Santa Claus over here, and then I was doing this horror show, and then I was dangling upside down from a crane, and then I was doing this close-up thing, and then I was doing this. It's like you do so much. Is there one thing that you prefer? Is there one thing, if I could snap my fingers and you could only do one aspect of performing for the rest of your life, is there one that you prefer over all others?
can I have two?
Go on then, I'll let you have it.
Okay. Sideshow stuff, sideshow stunts, anything to do with sideshow, and the bizarre magic.
Yeah.
And they do seem to be the avenues that I've gone down more.
Yeah.
And looking forward, it's more the bizarre sideshow side that I sort of lump them two together anyway, really. And that's where I'm going. I've sort of like got into the paranormal side as well, sort of like by accident. And that's opening up a lot of doors for me. I've done more TV shows on the paranormal than I've done on magic ever.
Wow.
Mm.
But for those people that are watching this, that maybe they're new into magic or they've just done close up their entire life, nothing wrong with that, and they're listening to you, what can you explain what you mean by sideshow and how you got into that? How you're because that's quite a very, even, you know, that's niche even for you. There's very few people that actually do that aspect of entertainment and make it pay for it for itself, and I know you do. So could you
Yeah.
talk a little bit about what it is and how you got into that aspect of performing?
Yeah. Well, I mean, sideshow now it's very mainstream now, but it wasn't when I started doing it. So sideshow, even though it started in Europe and like the UK, it's become very American. So if you think of a sideshow, you think of America. You think of all the colourful banners. You think of a freak show, really. But that's what it is. But I'm the stuff that I do is what you call working act stuff. So fire eating, bed of nails, hammering a nail into the face, the human blockhead, the electric chair. They're stunts, basically. They're physical stunts, like gross out stuff as well. So like the human blockhead is quite gross because I drill as well, a drill into my face. Eating broken glass. That's sideshow. They're sideshow skills. And when I first started doing, the first thing I started doing was fire eating. So when I was about 11, I'd started fire eating. I'd learned it in my bedroom. My mum and dad had no idea what I was doing. And that came from seeing a brilliant act. When I was at Pontins, I saw a brilliant act called Stromboli and Sylvia, who were a fire eating, sword swallowing act. As far as I'm concerned, they're both gone now, bless them, but they were the best in the world. They really were. And I saw them. And I'd not long, at age 11, bought a book from Supreme Magic Company called Stranger Than Fiction by Derek Lever that taught you all this stuff. I mean, you're not really meant to learn from a book. You're meant to learn from somebody else who does these skills because they are extremely dangerous. So I'd got this book. I'd watched Stromboli and Sylvia, and I was one of those precocious kids who wanted to meet every act. So after their show, I went and knocked on the dressing room door, and I wanted them to sign my autograph book anyway. And I just said, I really want to be a fire eater. What sort of fuel do you use, as you do when you're a cheeky 11-year-old? And I never really thought he was going to tell me, but he did. He did. He told me what fuel to use. So I was like, okay, great. And I went home and made the torches, copying the instructions from the book, got some of the fuel, which I won't tell you how I got that, but I got some of the fuel and I started practicing in my bedroom. So that was the first thing that I ever learned sideshow-wise. But again, you couldn't really, or I thought you couldn't really do that as an act. So I put it into my act. So the fire eating was always a spot in the show. And then the bed of nails, the straight jacket, because, you know, I use a real straight jacket. You can class that as sideshow as well. And sword walking, walking barefoot on blades, that sort of thing. So they all went into the act as individual pieces before I put them all together as one show. And actually, Stromboli and Sylvia later in life, they became really, really good friends. They didn't live far from me. They were only in Manchester. I was Liverpool. And I was up there all the time. And Stromboli was a mentor. He was, you know, gave me tips, gave me things from his show. I'd get a phone call, and Stromboli could talk. I mean, worse than me, he could talk for England. I was there 5 hours once, and all I said was hello. He'd been in the war, and he'd tell you his war stories, and he'd traveled the world with his act. He'd had freak shows and sideshows at Bellevue in Manchester and at Blackpool. So he told me all about that. He had a cellar that was full of all this sort of stuff. There was shrunken heads and skulls and executioners' swords down there. But he was just wonderful, and I really miss him every day. I still do. But the phone would go and he'd say, "Michael, come down. I've got something for you." And you think, "Oh my God, what is it this time?"
Wow.
He taught me so much. He taught me how to do the electric act, how to build an electric chair. He taught me all
I don't know what the electric act is.
So the electric act is, well, it goes back to an act called Walford Bodie. Walford Bodie, who that's another whole hour's episode there, Craig, on Walford Bodie. So he was a friend of Houdini's, and in the 1920s and earlier, Walford Bodie, he was a quack doctor, really. He'd do fake faith healing stuff. He'd do ventriloquism. He'd do hypnosis. And he had like a big Tesla coil, and he'd electrocute himself, and light bulbs from his fingertips, and sparks would go from his mouth, and he'd light cigarettes, things like that. And Houdini gave him, as a present, the original electric chair from Sing Sing prison. And Walford Bodie started using it in his act. So that's where the act came from. But then it became a staple of the sideshows, particularly in America. But the electric chair basically is, you have an electric chair, execution style, you know, Green Mile style electric chair, which you show is working. You turn it on, you touch a bulb to the seat, and you show that the bulb lights up. You'll touch a piece of tissue paper to the seat, and it bursts into flames. And then you switch it off, and you introduce the electric girl, Miss Electra, or whatever you're going to call her. Sit her in the chair, turn it on, pass 50,000 volts through her body, and have her light bulbs from her fingertips, lights fire torches from her tongue, that sort of thing. So
Wow.
that's the electric chair.
Wow. That's incredible. I mean, wow. Yeah, I'm speechless. I'm absolutely speechless. So another question.
Mm-hmm.
You're very right up until we're talking about your career at the moment, up until sort of the late 90s, and you're just gigging. You're just constantly on tour. You're not really having time to be within the magic community, as far as I can see. But
not much now.
But these days, you are very active in the magic community, especially over here in the UK. You lecture. Your lecture is amazing. We regularly see you on gala shows at conventions, lecturing at various different societies, and obviously you have your own dealership. You know, you have dealer stands at various different conventions over the years. My question is, how did you get into that side of things? Because that's a complete position from where you are. You know, you're so busy. You're on the road every single day doing this, electrocuting people, walking on nails, you know, doing all of this. How did you kind of transition more into having more to do within the magic community?
I mean, I tried to do as much in the magic community as I could out of season back then. So I was a regular at Bill Thompson's magic studio, the House of Secrets. I've been coming to the Blackpool Magic Convention since I was about 10, something like that. I used to come with my dad. I was a member of the Mahatma Magic Circle in Liverpool. But as I say, you're absolutely right. 10 months out of the year, I couldn't involve myself in anything like that. But I still loved it. I still loved mixing, and I still do, you know, mixing with magicians. There's some people I don't like out there and don't like me, and I just think, yeah, I just stay away from them. That's fine. That's cool. I still love being with magicians. I still love going to conventions, magic clubs, that sort of thing. So really, when I came off the road doing summer seasons, which was in the early 2000s, when I had my daughter and we decided, well, actually, we better not live out of a van. We better buy a house. We had a base then, really. And it just did enable me, because I was doing short runs, really. So my summer season in those days would be 6 weeks, you know. In the summer, I'd do the 6-week summer holidays. I wouldn't be stuck somewhere from March until November, which is how it was. And then, you know, you'd have a month off, and then you do the Christmas season. And then you'd have January, February off, and then it'd start again. I did have more time to myself. So I just got involved more. And I think because I knew so many old timers and so many people in the business who taught me things that were forgotten, really. And I didn't want those skills and acts to be forgotten. And I also didn't want the acts to be forgotten. You know, I'll still talk about Stromboli and Sylvia and Peter Nightingale and Bill Thompson and all these other people who really helped me and inspired me. So it was a case of feeling like I did want to give something back.
Yeah.
And also people were asking me as well, who say, well, you know, we want a lecture for the club that isn't just card tricks. And again, there's nothing wrong with card tricks, nothing wrong at all. But they did want their syllabus to be a little bit more varied. So they would ask me, well, can you do something on bizarre magic? We know nothing about bizarre magic. Can you do something on that? We know nothing about escapes. Can you do something on that? So it was just trying to, you know, get stuff out there. Really, it's a selfish thing, really. It's the stuff I just want to talk about, the stuff that interests me, really. And it just happens that it interests a few other people as well.
Wow. Okay, that's really interesting. And I'm going to ask you a question now that I don't know the answer to. So I'd love to know. Have you entered competitions over the years within the magic community? Because I feel like you're the sort of person that would have entered and won a ton of competitions, but I'm not too sure.
Yeah, no, I'm not a big competition person. Back in '96, Derek Lever asked us if we'd do the Blackpool Magic Championships when it was at the Horseshoe Bar.
Yeah, I remember
and we
that.
did that. We didn't win, but you know, it was fine. But I've never really been a competition person. You know, you put me out in front of thousands of people on stage, and it's fine. You know, it doesn't bother me at all. But certain things set off anxiety in me. One of them being competitions. Competitions, I'm not great at. It's they're in this. Well, auditions are a necessity, or they were. But they always set off the anxious side of me. So I never really was a competition person. That was just that one time.
And honestly, you don't need to be, because you've achieved so much success in this industry that you know, a lot of people, they enter competitions to try and make a name for themselves. You've already got that name. You've never been shy of work, so it's not been needed. On that subject, actually, Michael, you mentioned at the very beginning, you've always reinvented yourself. You've always changed what you've done. Has that been on purpose from kind of a marketing point of view? Hey, I'm going to reinvent myself because I see a gap in the market here. Nobody's doing this, so I'm going to jump into it. Or is it really just more of a case of, hey, I've never done that, I'm going to give that a go? Or what was your reason for constantly reinventing what you do?
It's all of those and all of the above. Yeah, I like variety, and like I said, I like having a bit of knowledge on every part of magic. Some of it's been for necessity. I think you know, when we had our daughter, for example, and my wife was my assistant, you know, we put the illusions to bed for a year, really, and I needed to do other stuff, you know. And at that time, I built a gunge tank, and I was going around with a game show around the holiday park. So I was doing that. Somebody taught me circus skills, and I started doing circus workshops because that's what the holiday parks wanted at the time. And, you know, I needed to work, I needed the money. And then some of it, again, it was from necessity, and there was a gap in the market, but it's something I'd always wanted to do. So I'd always wanted to do a lot of outdoor shows. And I think it was, it must be 15 years ago now. I was already doing the Sideshow act, which is Dr. Diablo, which is like an alter ego, really. So Dr. Diablo always did the Sideshow act. And I found that because Sideshow was starting to get a bit of a renaissance, particularly linked with burlesque. I was doing a lot of burlesque nights, burlesque shows. I'd done like Madame Jojo's in London, and I'd done the Raymond Review Bar before it shut down, stuff like that in Soho. And it was becoming very mainstream. And it sort of like got to, you could only get financially to a certain level doing the act as it was. So I thought, right, I want to do the outdoor stuff because I know that's where the money is. And I decided I was going to build a portable stage. So I built a portable outdoor stage that I could take around in the back of my van, that I could set up if I had to on my own. But there was a big flash. It looked big. And it was the same stuff. But because it was on the big stage, it was an attraction on its own. We used to, in the outdoor show business thing, we call it an act in its own arena. So, and, you know, I could triple my money by doing that. So I designed and spent about $1,500 building this outdoor stage and backdrop, which was trial and error. And by luck rather than anything, it worked. And that was it. And then all of a sudden I could go out and command bigger and better fees. And I was getting a little bit more noticed more in that field, you know, because the outdoor show business market is very, I mean, you talk about niche, that is a niche of a niche.
Yeah, it really is.
So that's how that side came about.
Wow. So here's a question for anybody who's watching this. I get on this channel every day, I get people going, I want to make my living out of being an entertainer. What do I do? How do I do it? As somebody who has done that their entire life and constantly reinvented themselves and still working all the time in so many different aspects of entertainment, not just magic, but so many different things, what advice for anybody watching this would you give them if they want to become a full-time entertainer?
Just say yes to everything. You know, I mean, a lot of people, you know, will have been doing magic a long time, but will have a job and want to make that move. And if that's the case, you're going to know what you're good at. You're going to know, well, I'm a mentalist, you know, I'm a close-up magician. If you've not got to that stage yet, then you just need to do as many things as you can, try as many things as you can, waste loads of money on props that you're never going to use again, but you've tried it, because you need to find who you are as a performer. So I think that's initially very important. Once you have found what you want to do, whether it's illusions or whether it's close-up magic, then you need to find out where you're going to be able to work it, where are you going to be able to perform it. So really for me now, illusions, I mean, personally, I don't think, I mean, I mostly did the illusions for the holiday camps, the holiday parks. I don't think there's as much of a market in that as there used to be. I think if you want to do illusions now, you need to get on the cruise ship. So I think that's what you need to do. Yeah. If you're a close-up magician, personally, I mean, I don't do as much close-up as I used to do. I mean, I was resident close-up magician for TGI Fridays and Frankie and Benny's for 6 years, you know. So, but wow. I don't do it as I used to. I mean, for me now, and I'm sure you'll agree with me on this one, Craig, it's the wedding market. The wedding market for close-up. So that's what you need to target that. And you need to realize that you're going to have to do wedding fairs. You're going to have a booth. You're going to have to pay for your stand. You're going to have to go out there and network. You're going to have to do all this. So it depends really what type of genre of magic you want to do. So that's the first thing. Find your genre and then find out where you're going to work it. Work as much as you can. And then the next step in that really is making yourself unique to stand out in that market. What are you going to do to make sure that people come to you? And I found this in the kids' entertainment side. Nobody was doing Halloween magic. It's just going back a bit. Nobody was doing Halloween magic as a theme. Certainly not in the UK. In the States they were, but not over here. And I just looked at it and thought, you know, you get to October half term, and if you're willing to travel around a little bit, you've got 2 weeks of work there, constant work. So I put together a Halloween themed show. And at the time, I was the only person doing it.
Wow.
And I could go anywhere. And because I was the only person doing it, people had to phone me. And because people had to phone me and I was the only person doing it, I could charge whatever I wanted. So at the time, and this is like 15 years ago, maybe a little bit more, we were doing a lot of work for Tesco's, and Tesco's would book us in and we would be getting paid. We'd do a 2-hour set, like a themed Halloween magic show and some themed, I don't know why all those balloons just went off in my background there.
That was magical.
I'd rather it was skulls or something. But but 15 years ago, for that 2-hour set, me and my wife, we were getting 1,200 quid.
Wow.
So, and that's what, I mean, now loads of people do. Probably because I started lecturing and I put a book out on Halloween magic for kids entertainers. So loads of people are doing it now. But that's it. But I was the only one doing it. So that was my USP, really. That was my unique thing. And now it's more the Sideshow bizarre stuff. Like you said, people know me for that now, for the weird shit. So people call me for that. So if you can do that in whatever your field is, then, I mean, I don't advertise either. I think it's very difficult to advertise as a magician nowadays, but I don't. So everything I get is either from me making contact with people or people knowing about me and coming to me.
But one thing that you've always done so well is everybody knows you. I'll get booked to go to events and they'll be like, oh, you know Michael Diamond? You know Michael Diamond? Like, it feels like everybody knows you. And when you've got such a great reputation and you're connected with so many people in so many aspects of entertainment, you don't really need to advertise because you're the first thing that people think of. And I think that's, really important.
It's also a good point that people can forget you very easily in this business. For example, if you go away on a cruise for 9 months and come back, it's almost like starting again.
Yeah,
that's something. And so you have to be aware of that. So if you're working away, you still have to keep your contact over here, and you still have to keep plugging away and reminding and sending out date sheets and things like that. One of the other things I did for 6 years, I was the lead singer in a comedy show band.
What?
I know. So, yeah. Basically, there was a that used to work for Pontins called the Amazing Bavarian Stompers. It was a Bavarian comedy show. And I met up with them years after Pontins, and they said, we're putting out a second unit. We don't know anyone who'll do it. And I just said, oh, I'll do it. Just out of the blue, as you do, because I like saying yes to everything, within reason. I said, yeah, I'll do it. And they said, really? Do you sing? I said, yeah, I'm a bass voice, but yeah, I can sing. And I know the show because I watched it every night at Pontins. And from that, I was frontman for their second unit for 6 years. So, that was every Friday and Saturday night, 52 weeks of the year. Now, if I had an event coming up that I wanted to go to, like if there was I do a lot of tattoo conventions. So if a big tattoo convention came up and it was good money, I would just let them know way in advance, and they'd put a dep in to cover me as the front man, lead singer. But what I did find was that because I was doing that for 6 years, and a lot of agents knew I was doing that, they would stop phoning me because they were like, well, there's no point in phoning Michael for that Saturday night because we know he's out with the band. So that was, so when the bubble burst on the band and the contract stopped coming in, I struggled a little bit to get my name back out there again. Whereas I should have always been plugging away at promoting my stuff, even though I wasn't going to be available. Although, as I say, if something came in that was good money, and I didn't take the piss too much with the band, taking every other week off. If a big thing came in, like I always took the convention weekend off in Blackpool, 2 or 3 of the big tattoo conventions I was doing, I'd always take those weekends off. So yeah, it's I think you always need to spread yourself around quite a bit, really, and particularly if you're doing residencies, getting regular gigs, make sure you keep in contact with with other venues and acts and other openings for work. The other thing I've always said is sometimes it's easier to be, sometimes it's better to be an easy act than a good act. So you can be the best act in the world and turn up at a venue and you can be an arsehole and they'll never have you again. You can be a pretty average act, which that's what I class myself as, you know. I'm not crap, but I'm not brilliant. I'm somewhere in the middle. But I'm pretty easy to get on with. I'm pretty, if I turn up at a gig and they say, oh, well, you're going to have to do this, and I will try to help them out as much as I can. And I think people do appreciate that. So, be an easy act. Don't turn up and be a diva. Don't be an arsehole. There was a couple of acts that we used to get coming in at Pontins, and they were very, very good. Magic acts, I'm not going to mention them. And they would be very, very good. But Ents managers just wouldn't book them because they'd turn up and be making demands and just being a real pain in the ass. So, their career doing the cabaret circuit at Pontins. And again, back then, the cabaret circuit at Pontins was something to do. You'd achieved something if you got on the circuit for Pontins. But they never really made it on the circuit for that reason.
Wow. So be easy to work with.
Yeah.
Always say yeah. Yeah. Always. I mean, those are. Alec Powell, I remember many, 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 many years ago, Alec Powell giving me a piece of advice. He said, Craig, say yes and then figure it out afterwards. And that's how I learned pickpocketing. I didn't know how to pickpocket. An agent rang me up and said, can you pickpocket for a gig? Yeah. Okay. 3 weeks. I had 3 weeks to learn how to steal a watch and take a wallet, and that's what you do. You kind of figure it out.
Yeah. And I think it must have been Bill Thompson who said that to me. Always say yes. There's a story of like one of my heroes, Peter Cushing, the actor, very early on in his career. He auditioned for a part, and I can't remember the name of the part, in the Laurence Olivier film of Hamlet. And when he turned up for the audition, they said, can you fence? And he said, oh, yes, of course I can. Well, he'd never picked up a sword or a fencing foil in his life. So he turned up to the set for the first day of filming. He'd learned his script and stuff. He was off book, but, he didn't know how to fence. And they booked in one of the finest fencing tutors in the world, this French guy, who turned up and, he'd said to Peter Cushing, have you ever fenced before? And Peter Cushing said, no, I've never done it before, but I needed the job. And this guy apparently then said, well, because you were honest with me, I'm going to teach you to be the best fencer in England. And he did. And,
wow.
That all came from just saying yes and then worrying about what he was going to do later. I think, you do see people on Facebook, though, don't you? The magicians saying, I've got a gig on Friday. What am I going to do? You've got to have some sort of plan. You've got to have some sort of idea or basic skill set in place first. Yeah. I mean, I'm a real overthinker anyway, and I always like to have alternatives for things, an emergency kit. I always carry. I mean, I drive a van anyway, which is a help. So in the back of the van is always more stuff than I need. So if I turn up and the thing I've got planned isn't going to work, I've got a plan B. Because you've always got to perform. If you've been booked to perform, you've got to do something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can't. It's not the client's fault if you're there and your stuff's not going to work. You got to make it work somehow.
Oh yeah, well sometimes it is the client's fault, but you still have to make it work, and that's the thing about being an easy act.
Yeah,
I think in all my years, I've never turned around and gone home. And this is my 35th year as a pro, and I've never turned around and gone home. Not once.
No.
Even though I felt like it many, many, many times.
Yeah, I agree.
I've done back when I was doing loads of kids' parties, like house parties, which again I don't do so many of them anymore, even though I still love doing a kids' show. I've ended the show because there was no way it was going to carry on the way it was going. But I've done something to fill in my time and satisfy the client and get paid. That's the most important thing. Leave them happy, get paid.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. At the end of the day, it's a business.
Yeah, yeah. And sometimes you do have to grit your teeth. A friend of mine, Andrew Normansell, who you'll know, Andrew,
Oh
who
yeah,
I think
Andrew.
hilarious. A lot of people don't get his humor, but I think he's hilarious. He always says to me, "Grin and bank it," and I just the amount of times I've had to grit my teeth through because I know it's a pickup job and I'm going to get paid at the end of it.
That's very true. It's very
Yeah.
true. Very, very true. So here's a question. I got one more question for you, which is,
Mhm.
you have achieved so much. Like, you've done so much in this industry. If you could take almost any magician in the UK and say, hey, this is what you would have achieved by the end of your career, and they would, you could give them what you've done up until this point, they'd be over the moon happy. I mean, you've literally done it all, but you're nowhere near the end of your career. So, and I know that you're quite ambitious, and I know you like to move in different directions, and you're constantly reinventing yourself. We've talked about that. Is there anything left in your magical bucket list or your entertainment bucket list that you still want to achieve? Anything that you haven't done that you want to do? Anything that you kind of think, you know what, that's what I'm pushing towards at the moment, or I'd like to knock that off my bucket list?
Yes, sort of.
Okay.
I will pull you up on me being ambitious because I'm not, and that is my problem. I don't push myself enough.
It comes across that you're ambitious from the outside looking in. It really
Yeah,
does. Like, oh, now here's Michael doing this, here's Michael doing that. It's kind of like you can't do that much and just fall into it by accident.
no, it's no. Yeah. I'm my own worst critic. I really am. I don't believe in myself as much as I should, and I'm not ambitious, and I don't push myself as much. I know that. Otherwise, maybe I would be further along and further up in my career. I think because I like to work and I like to talk about the stuff that I like. I think that's why it seems like really ambitious because I just like to talk about the stuff I like to talk about, and I love being with like-minded people. That's why when you asked me to do this, I was like, really? Well, first of all, really, you want to speak to me? But I was also really looking forward to it because I respect you as a performer and a creator and a reviewer and Ryland and everything that you guys have done as a father and son thing, which reminded me very much of me and my dad. And I thought, brilliant! I'm going to be talking to Craig Petty, and we've got a like mind, so I like that, and that's why. And I think that's the other thing, networking and talking to as many people as you can, and being nice and friendly with as many people as you can. Uh, People will remember you. So that's just that. But as far as where I want to go, I want to do more TV stuff. Now, a lot of the stuff I've done recently on TV isn't really magic. It's more on the paranormal side because that's always been an interest. So I've sort of like got a little bit more exposure with the paranormal stuff, and I'd like to go down that route a little bit more
Mm,
on TV. So
okay.
there's fire at the moment, but nothing really.
Well, that's interesting. Yeah, there is a lot of interest in paranormal all over the world, but especially on TV. I'm seeing more and more shows coming up all the time.
Yeah, yeah. It's excuse me, because I've always had an interest and a belief in the supernatural and ghosts in particular, but I'm not a I'm not convinced on mediums. So I have sort of like that weird two-sided belief system, really, that I believe in ghosts and I believe in spirits and the afterlife. But I don't believe that some guy can tell you that your grandma stood behind you and she's happy and all that sort of thing. So one of the lectures that I've recently put together actually is about fraudulent Victorian mediums and some of their techniques. And I've always been fascinated in that history, which again links with Houdini and Escapology, because the Escapology came from the spiritualists. If it wasn't for the spiritualists, Escapology wouldn't exist.
I didn't
Um,
know that.
yeah, that's absolutely true. If you look at the Davenport brothers, who were tied up in a spirit cabinet, and then all the manifestations would appear in and around the cabinet. You opened it up the cabinet at the end, and they were still tied. Well, back then, of course, that was accredited to the spirits. It couldn't have been the Davenport brothers doing it because they were tied up. And it was John Neville Maskelyne who was one of the first people who exposed the Davenport brothers and other early mediums, saying, well, no, all it is they're getting out of their restraints, then they're getting back in again. So he took that and put it into his own shows as an expose, but also used some of those techniques to do escapes. And that's where Escapology came from. So long before Houdini. Houdini just popularized it and did it very well.
Wow. I didn't even know that. That's incredible.
Yeah, well, it's said that Houdini, the Metamorphosis, the sub-trunk, he bought that secondhand. It was invented by Maskelyne as a expose, again, of the Davenport brothers. But again, Houdini, you've got to give him his credit. He made it what it is, but it wasn't 100% original invention.
Wow. See, this is the other aspect of you that a lot of people don't know. Your knowledge of magical history is just staggering, to be perfectly honest, Michael. Like I could probably ask you a question about something and you would immediately know and be able to cite multiple references. As a side question, is that something that you do as a passion? Is that something that you are interested in, or is it just because you've seen so much over the years?
Oh, no, it's definitely a passion. I think it's, a lot of people don't think that it's important to know anything about magic history, which is fine. And, you don't really need to know anything about magic history to go out and be a bloody good magician. You don't. But I think it's important you do. I think it's important you know where you came from, on whose shoulders we're standing. Also, there's so much in the history of magic that's been forgotten. It was a Bill Thompson thing. He'd say, look in the old books. And he's right. There's so much material that's forgotten about, that's lurking out there and is ready to be reborn from somebody who can discover it. So I think that's important. But it's just fascinating, that the lives of these, and some of the stuff that, these guys were doing, you'll never see again. You'll never see that period of magic again, the golden age, and the stuff that they were touring with 5 tons of equipment, and doing one-nighters. You're not going to see that again. So when you go into the magical history, it's just fascinating to know that that's, if you were born 100 years ago, well, that's what you'd have been doing. You wouldn't have been doing weddings with close-up, going out with your everyday carry and doing that sort of stuff. You wouldn't, you'd be touring with a trainload of trunks and, doing the same 8 minutes every night for the rest of your life. And that's how you'd be, that 8 minutes would be perfect. Because I think you're going to get really good at something. You have to be doing it over and over and over again.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. 100%.
But the thing with magic history is, you start going into deep dives and, all of a sudden, oh shit, where's that week gone? I started the new lecture that I've put together. I'm only concentrating on 2 materialization mediums, but all of a sudden, a week's worth of research has gone by and you've gone down rabbit hole after rabbit hole after rabbit hole. And it's like, wow, really? So with the mediums, for me, it was discovering techniques that, people didn't really know how they did stuff. I didn't know how they did a lot of the stuff. So it was going down that route of, you'll read some old books and you'll find that little one tiny, tiny clue as to how they did something. And then in another book, there'll be another tiny clue. And you're gradually putting that jigsaw together to get the whole picture of, that's how they did it.
But that takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of patience. It takes a lot of diligence. It's not something that you can literally just, you can't Google it. You can't just go on the internet and Google it.
No. And again, that's one of the reasons why, because magic is so accessible now. Magic, the magic that we love, close-up magic, stand-up magic, it's very easily accessible. In fact, I was doing a close-up gig a couple of years ago and I'd done this table. And they said, I was moving on. They said, oh, can you come back? Can you come back and show us something else later? So I said, sure. So it was getting towards the end of the night. And I knew that this table I needed to go back to. So I went back. And often when I go back and do a table again, I'll do the invisible deck routine. because I can do it for the whole table. It's a great kicker. It's got some good comedy in it. It's nothing particularly original about my routine, but I was doing it, and there was a guy to my right sat down, and as I'm doing the routine, he's on his phone, and I thought, oh, this guy's just not interested at all. And as I got to the climax and I did the thing and I turned around the card and I got the round of applause, this guy stood up from the side, grabbed the cards out of my hand and explained to the whole table how it worked. Because what had happened is he'd been Googling while I was doing it, how this thing worked. So luckily it was my last table and, I could go home then. Thank God, because I was in a foul mood after that, obviously. But magic's accessible. Whereas stuff like Escapology, Sideshow skills, how the Victorian mediums materialized ghosts in the middle of a living room, it's not out there. And you do have to dig, and it's work to find out how that stuff works. And I like that. And it was when we were young, Craig, you know what it was like to learn a lot of this stuff. You had to hang around with old men.
Yeah, you did.
And that's how you found out stuff. And you got accepted into groups, and they said, oh, I'm going to teach you how to second deal today. And it was, but now it's very, very, very easy.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. And I think that's, going off on a tangent, I think that's part of the problem. It's so accessible. You can learn almost every secret in magic that I think what happens is people don't get good at one thing because it's kind of almost like overload. Okay, right, I'm going to learn this and this and this and this and this. And, when I first got into magic, I remember spending 6 months just walking around learning how to palm a coin. Just that's all it was. There was nothing else because I knew that I had to do that to get good of it. And there was no other stuff that I could learn, It's, I think that...
It's Peter Nightingale, who the guy I worked with in '89 when I was 17. He never started off as a magician. He was a singer and a souffleur. Do you know what a souffleur is?
I have no idea. What's a souffleur?
Souffleur is a whistler.
Really?
So they were whistler, yeah. So
yeah.
Well, there were professional whistlers. There was a guy called Ronnie Ronald who released singles, and he was a big theatre star. And more recently, there was a lady called Dottie Wayne who did like a souffleur act. Well, Peter was a souffleur, so he'd sing and then he'd whistle parts of the song and stuff like that. Well, that's what he did. But he wanted to get into magic, so he had magic lessons. And I remember him saying to me, and I'd already done magic for quite a while. He said, somebody once told me, with cards, all you need to do is be able to force a card, control a card, and palm a card. That's all you need. And I thought, actually, you're right. Really?
Yeah, the way you are.
Yeah. Need to do. So again, there's extra things you can do, like you can learn your Mercury card folds and things like that. Okay, so there are extra things on top, but the basics, if you can control a card, force a card, and palm a card, you can do pretty much anything, really, can't you?
Yeah, yeah.
And you count if you want to do packet tricks and that sort of thing and displays. But I thought, oh, actually, yeah. So you can overload. I think you're absolutely right. The other interesting thing about Peter is he only had one hand. He was a thalidomide baby, so he had a deformed hand. His right hand was deformed. But I tell you what, he could do one of the best classic forces I'd ever seen.
Really?
Unbelievable. Yeah, really good. So yeah, I know. I mean, I've done it. I remember seeing Teller. I went to Paul Stone's Innovation Magic Convention in Vegas, and Teller did the Red Ball lecture there, which is still the best magic lecture I've ever seen in my life. And he was talking about how he developed the Red Ball routine. And he said, well, basically, what I did was I went out and bought or found every single method of the floating ball in existence, and then absorbed all that knowledge and condensed it into that one routine. So, yeah, there's definitely, I think, a place for that sort of overload. But if you're doing if you're going out and you're doing different tricks every week, I mean, I know you use a lot of new material, but you've still got your core.
Yeah.
And then you'll put something new in.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what, when I was working in restaurants, that's what I would do. I would put something in every couple of weeks or a few weeks, but I still had my core act. It's like my kids show now. It's pretty much the same I was doing 30 years ago, really.
Well, when it works, you don't change it. I think that elements of my kids show are there from when I did my very first kids show. They haven't changed. I think I've been doing the Silver Scepter now as long back as I've been doing magic. You know, I'd
Oh,
never take it out my show.
yeah. It's funny, that was a later thing that I put in, you know, and again, when I was working in the holiday parks, because I needed to have that much material, I would do my kids' magic show. My 1 hour kids' magic show was 4 tricks. And when I came away from I was going and doing private shows, I realized then that you can't do 4 tricks in an hour and call yourself a magician. You can call yourself a kids' entertainer, possibly, but you can't call yourself a magician.
No.
So that's when I was put in. So I think I'm up to about maybe 6 or 7 now in the hour. And that's one of the reasons when I put the Silver Scepter in. But I love the Silver Scepter.
Oh, Silver Scepter is amazing.
Yeah. It really is amazing. Yeah. Yeah. There's so much good stuff out there. It's funny how tastes change, though, and everybody tends to go with the herd, don't they?
Yeah,
So, you know, when I was working, and still now, you know, I use a roll-on table. But now everybody seems to use flight cases on, you know, the waiter stand. Everybody seems to them now. And I'm like, wow, I couldn't work out of that. I really couldn't. It's but everybody does that now, don't they? Everybody does the same thing.
Yeah. It's kind of it follows trends, doesn't it? It really does.
Yeah. That's another thing, you know, if you're going into the business now, I would say, I mean, we're all quite sedulous really when we start off. We all imitate the people we like, and you know, not so much copy, but we'll do a similar style until we find our own way. But I would certainly say now, try and be as individual as you can in your working, if you want to get people come to you, because they have to come to you.
Yeah, that's really, really good advice. I'm going to wrap this up, but I want to ask you 2 last things.
Yeah,
The
it's
first,
fine.
we talked about television.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever considered doing like Britain's Got Talent or anything like that, or what? Because I think you'd be amazing on it. Obviously, you know, you and I remember way before Britain's Got Talent opportunity knocked. TV talent shows have been around forever, and they've always been a jumping point to springboard people's career. I mean, you've already got an incredible career, but you've talked about wanting to do more on TV.
Mm-hmm.
I think now more than ever, Britain's Got Talent is kind of very safe for magicians with Russ Stevens' involvement. It's not like it was in the early days. I think Russ has been a very positive influence on that.
Yeah. Oh, did I go off then, or am I?
Oh, you're here. Oh, you're still there.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, Russ has been incredible for Britain's Got Talent, and I think you've hit the nail on the head there. It is a safe place now. I mean, you're not getting audiences shouting off, 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 and you're not getting really nasty comments from the judges anymore. It's something I'd consider. I don't know what the hell I would do. I really don't. I think the closest thing to what I would want to do on Britain's Got Talent is what Elizabeth Best did. She did the Haunted. You know, she took Amanda under the stage, didn't she, into like the seance room, and I think that's the closest to what I would want to do if I was going to go down Britain's Got Talent route. But again, it's never say never. Never say never.
Yeah. I can see that working out really well for you. And one other question. We've already said that we could make this interview about 10 hours long just by spending an hour or 2 on each particular aspect of what you've done in your life.
Yeah.
And I know you've got a million stories, and I know a lot of these stories you probably can't even share on YouTube. But as somebody who has done so much and probably has got a million stories, is there one story that you can share with us before we wrap this whole thing up? One interesting or amusing or kind of something that's happened to you throughout your career that you can talk about, that you can actually talk about, because I know a lot of the stuff you can't.
God, yeah. Well, again, so many I couldn't talk about because not necessarily it'd get me in trouble, but it'd get the person I was talking about in trouble, you know. And I worked, you know, Lee Mack was a blue coat with me, you know, back in the day at Henry, you know. So I was working with a lot of people who were names, and, you know, I daren't tell stories about them. But I will tell you a story about, it's one of my favourites, this. So when I was working at Blackpool Pleasure Beach for Peter Nightingale, as I say, I was 17, and although I'd done a bit, I was still a bit green, really. And Peter used to do his kids' magic show, and he used doves, rabbits in his show. But he also had a performing poodle called Whiskey, and Whiskey was epileptic, right? So here I am at 17 working with this one-handed magician who's got an epileptic performing poodle. Right? So people don't believe me when I tell them this, but it's absolutely true. So at one point, what had happened was, like, Peter would do his show and he'd produce a couple of doves in the show, and he'd have them sat on a little perch at the side. And then all of a sudden, now you've got to remember this in a Burnley accent. I try and do a Burnley accent the best I can. So he'd produce the doves. He's about halfway through his show, and he'd go, "Whiskey, Whiskey." And Whiskey, the dog, had run on from the side. And then Peter would lean back and put his arms out like that. He'd go, "Whiskey." And Whiskey would jump up and into his arms. And then Peter had put him on his roll-on table. And then he'd get this, like, pole and put it in Whiskey's mouth. And it had like a carousel on each side. And then he'd sit the dove on each side, and the doves would rotate. And then Whiskey would come up on his paws like that. And it was really cute, and the kids loved it. Very reminiscent of Norman Barrett and his budgies, you know, but with a poodle. But sometimes, about once every few weeks, Peter would go, "Whiskey," and Whiskey would come on and then just, like, collapse onto the stage and throw a fit, and he'd just be twitching like that on the floor, like that. The kids would all be like, but Whiskey would be like twitching like that. So Peter would pick up the curtain, boot Whiskey under the curtain, and then drop the curtain, and then just carry on with his show. And then about 5 minutes later, this slightly confused, pissed-looking Whiskey would wander back onto the stage like that's like, "Isn't it my bit now? Am I supposed to be on now?" So that happened quite often. And then there was another that Peter had Whiskey's hair done. He'd been to the poodle parlour, but he dyed in pink. And then Peter got a matching pink perm as well, so that the pair of them would have this pink. Oh, there was 100 stories like that. Like the doves, we had fans in the sheriff's bar, and behind the bar, you'd have to switch off the fans before the doves had come out. Well, this one day, whoever it was behind the bar hadn't put and it was packed. It was an Illumination Saturday. So the whole place was packed. And we had an area, a carpeted area in front of the stage where the kids would sit. So Peter produced this dove, and it was a bit skittish, and it flew off, and they hadn't put the fans off behind the bar. And this dove flew straight into the fan, got mangled, and then this bloody stump of a dove just, like, dropped right into the middle of this area of kids. It was like something out of The Walking Dead. There was blood everywhere. There was kids screaming and running in every direction, and we had to shut the whole bar down because it was just horrendous.
Oh my God!
So,
Oh dear me!
but something like that almost every day of the summer season.
Wow! Wow!
Yeah.
But it's like that, you know, for anybody that's watching this that's new into magic, you know, when you're a blue coat or red coat in my case, it's the same thing. Every day there's something completely insane that happens, and nobody will believe you because it just seems completely just ridiculous that could happen, but it just does.
Oh, it does. Yeah, it happens all the time. Yeah. I mean, Pontins is another thing. I knew a kid's entertainer for Pontins, an older chap, and I'm not going to mention his name. And he wrote a book, and he let me read the manuscript. He said, "Oh, I could never publish this, Michael. I could never publish it." I said, "Why not?" He said, "Read it and you'll see." And it was called All Cock and No Bull, this book. And I read it, and I gave it him back and said, "Yeah, you're right. You can never publish that. Never." Yeah. Nothing illegal in there, but
yeah,
too many names, and too many very, very dodgy stories. Yeah. Funny though. But yeah, it was great. You don't get that anymore, do you? I mean, I work the holiday parks now, and we would work a full day. We would be working all day, and then as soon as you finish work, you'd go and get changed. You'd be back out again, and you'd all be together. The whole team would be together at the bar.
Yep.
Or parties in the chalets and apartments, and with the other acts as well. All the other acts. There used to be a Mexican magician called Kanshi, who's still a friend of mine on Facebook. And we'd have tequila parties at 6 o'clock in the morning on Hemsby Beach, with Kanshi. The cabarets would always come out with us. You don't get that anymore. You don't.
No, you don't. No.
You don't want to. The teams now, they don't really seem to want to go out. They don't. Very rarely they'll have a party, and they don't really want to. I mean, but cabarets, we were getting the same cabarets every week for months, so we knew them well.
Yeah.
Now,
it's a lot of the visiting cabs. They'll do maybe the same park twice in a year, if that.
Yeah. So you don't get to know the teams like you used to. No, which is a shame.
You're right. Being a coach entertainer is the hardest thing that I've ever done, by far. But it's also the most fun that I ever had.
I mean, I met my wife there. She was choreographer when I was kids entertainer, and so great things came out of it. I've still got plenty of friends now who they have a Pontins reunion actually. My wife went to it this year because it clashed with Blackpool Magic Convention, and I couldn't go. So it's, and you're getting people from Pontins from way before my time. Going back to the 60s, they were blue coats, and they're still meeting up now. You do get life friendships, and I'm sure you've got loads of friends from Pontins.
Yeah, I have. That's amazing.
Much.
Say again?
It teaches you so much.
It does, and that's the thing, wrapping this whole thing up, being a magician isn't just about the magic. The magic is just a vehicle that you choose to use. But really, the most important thing is being an entertainer. And I honestly think the best advice I could give anybody is learn to entertain. You could be the best magician in the world, but if you're not entertaining, you're going to struggle. Learn to entertain, and then you just, you can do anything.
Oh, definitely. I think it was Cy Enfield was one of the ones who said they have to like you. If they like you, they'll like what you do.
Yeah.
So you can do it. Like you said, you could do anything if they like you.
Yeah. Be likable. 100%. Maybe that's where I'm going wrong. I'll work on it.
Oh, not at all. Not at all. Saying that, I mean, Donald Trump's doing okay, isn't he?
Yeah, he's not done too bad for himself.
Yeah. And I will refuse to comment further because I know you're going to have plenty of American.
Lots of Americans on this channel. Yeah. But Michael, I had high hopes for this interview. I've been wanting to interview you for a long time. And my God, you didn't disappoint. I hope at some point we can maybe do a follow-up interview in a few months down the line and delve deeper into some of those parts of your career and talk about some of the stories, because honestly, you have done more than most people I know, but this has been a phenomenal interview. And also, I think really eye-opening for a lot of people that are watching this, very inspirational, very eye-opening. And you've given some amazing advice. And genuinely, this has been one of my favorite interviews I've done on the channel. It really has.
I've really enjoyed it, Craig. It's been a really nice way to spend a morning. It really has.
Yeah, it's been awesome, mate. So what's your social media? If people have watched this and they've never heard of Michael Diamond before and they want to know, is there a place that people can go where they find out where you're going to be, what conventions you're going to be at? Because I know that you're always lecturing. We just talked about you're going to be at Chris's convention coming up soon. Is there a place where people can find out what you've got going on?
I'm terrible at social media. I really am. I have 3 Facebook pages. I have Michael Diamond, which is my personal Facebook page, which you can see. I think it's pretty open to everybody. You can see what I'm doing. I also have a Facebook page, Michael Diamond Magician, which I don't update enough. And then I have another one, which is Dr. Diablo, which is for the Sideshow and unusual stuff. And that's spelt Dr. DOCTOR DIABLO, Dr. Diablo. I'm on Instagram and Twitter or X. I'm on all them, but I never really use them, One of the other things is I do work quite a lot for other people as well. So John Marshall from Sideshow Illusions, who's a really good mate, and it's nice to work with one of your idols, and I work with John Marshall from Sideshow Illusions. So you know, I do share that on my Facebook pages when I can, but Sideshow Illusions, which is John's business, it's always worth checking him out as well, because I work a lot with his Dr. Phantasma show.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah.
Okay. So
I like people, so
yeah, we'll hopefully people can find you. But here's the thing: if you see a convention coming up and you see Michael Diamond's name on it, you want to go to that convention. I know coming up soon, Chris Cross's convention up in Newcastle,
yeah,
which is taking place very soon, isn't it? I think it's
it's a week tomorrow. A week tomorrow.
Yeah, so the kind of around about the 19th, 20th, sort of, that weekend, April the 20th, so to speak.
Yeah.
You're going to be there. You're going to be on the gala show. You're also going to be doing a lecture. So it's if anyone's going up there, make sure that you see Michael's lecture.
And it's lineup as well. There's Steve Faulkner. There's Luke Jamay. There's loads of people on it. It's really good, and you'll definitely find that. Chris Cross, Wizards Weekend, he calls it. You'll find that. And I'm actually
third year now.
Pardon?
It's in its third year now, I think.
Yes, I think it is his third year. Yeah. That'll be an experience knowing Chris. So it's that should be a good one. I'm looking forward to it. And this Saturday, actually, I'm doing a lecture for the United Kingdom Escape Artists Convention.
And that's taking place ironically at the House of Secrets in Blackpool, isn't it?
It is, and we've got some brilliant people talking with that. We've got Jonathan Goodwin's going to be there, and he's going to be talking. Carl Bartoni, who's a legendary escapologist who famously escaped from the straitjacket upside down from the top of Blackpool Tower. He's going to be talking. Chris Gower, who was in the Guinness Book of Records for the world's largest handcuff collection. He's going to be talking. It's going to be really, really good one, that.
Well, here's something interesting. Ryland, you mentioned Ryland earlier. He's gutted he can't go to that because he's so interested in escapology. He's got a load of handcuffs from Danny Hunt. He's doing Danny's Ferrybridge Day of Magic in the gala show, and he's picking Danny's making him a straitjacket. And he really wanted to go, but then he got into the final of the Magic Circle Young Magician of the Year, which is the same end. So he's down London doing that, and he's like, I can't believe I can't go to the Escapology convention. So,
yeah, well, he should join the UKEA. I think it's only £10 a year.
I'll get to join it.
Book page from that, and there's, they do have other events throughout the year as well.
Oh wow!
So, and everybody's so generous and sharing and nurturing in that as well. Again, it's like the Bizarre convention that I do, Doomsday. They're really safe spaces for sharing and trying out stuff and people wanting to learn. I've got to do a shout out for that for the Doomsday Magic Convention. It's the Bizarre Magic Convention Doomsday, which is in May in Derby. And if you're interested in that, you need to go to the Lebanon Circle website, Lebanon Circle Magic, and you'll find out all about that.
Oh wow! Derby's just up the road from me, so I might.
Oh, you'd love it, Craig. It's brilliant. It really is. The other thing is they don't just have magicians doing lectures. They have people like, film directors, authors, anyone who's into like storytelling. So, authors, film directors and magicians, because it's very story based, the Bizarre Magic side. So
that's awesome.
A bit like I'm going on and on.
No, man, this is so interesting. I'm going to put links to all of that. I'm going to find all the links. To the Escapology convention, to the Bizarre convention, to Chris's convention. I'm going to put links down in the description.
Yeah.
But Michael, incredible interview. I hope you come back on the channel again soon.
Definitely, whenever you're ready.
Congratulations on all your success, and I'm sure we'll see each other soon. But thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Cheers, Craig. It's been brilliant.
No problem. Guys, I want you to do me a favor. Leave a comment down in the comments down below. Let Michael know what you thought of the interview. I thought it was absolutely brilliant. And trust me, guys, if you see Michael on any convention, drop everything and go and see him, because he is a legend of this community. And you can learn so much from just hanging out with him. But I'll see you again soon. On behalf of the legend Michael Diamond, I'm Craig Petty. This is Magic TV. Thank you very much for watching. And I'll see you again soon.